Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own. Hi everyone, welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they are released. Today's film we're talking about is Napoleon, which is directed by Ridley Scott and stars Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby. Now, if you've been around on the channel for a while, you'll know that I like to, at the start of each year, look at the list of films coming out or being released and go, what has the potential to be my favourite film of the year, or certainly in my top 5 favourite films of the year. And once it was first announced that we had Joaquin Phoenix in one of his biggest roles yet, obviously he's one of the most premium actors on the planet at this point after things like Joker and his Oscar win for that, so that certainly was an appealing part for me. Add to the mix Vanessa Kirby, who I'm a big fan of from The Crown, and even in something more recently, in something like Mission Impossible this year alone. So adding the both of them to the mix, and of course having the great Ridley Scott, who of course is probably at this point, or not even probably, definitely at this point, a Hall of Fame director, with the amount of wonderful films under his last 10, 20, 30 years. He has been a staple of direction and film direction over this last while. And yes, he's had some swings and misses, but he's had some real hits, and I mean, as good as they get. So I'm a big fan of Ridley Scott. Yes, I understand that he can have, as I say, some maybe not as connective films, and some real ones. There's quite a variety. He's not a director that always knocks it out of the park, like some others that I'm a big fan of, but he's good for what he is. He's great for what he is, for that matter. So having Ridley Scott, Joaquin Phoenix, Vanessa Kirby, the story of Napoleon, which of course is one of the most recognisable historic figures of time, if you like, certainly in the French side and European side of things, very recognisable character. I'm sure all of us in history class at school heard some form of the Napoleon story, or you've just heard the song Waterloo by ABBA. You know about Napoleon. Napoleon is a very recognisable figure. So going into this, there was certainly pressure for it to be, I know, historically accurate. I know a lot of critics have been already attacking the film for some of the historical discrepancies, let's say. I don't really go into movies like that. I'm not a historian. I'm a movie fan. I go in to see a great tale being told, an epic movie. And did I get that? Did I get that with Napoleon? Did I go into this film getting did I come out of this film, I should say, getting what I went into it hoping to get, which is a great movie experience, an epic movie experience. And I know that word can be thrown around quite a lot, but I feel a movie like this, with the battle scenes and things like that from the trailer you might have seen, there was certainly the potential for it to be classed as an epic, an epic film of 2023. We've had a few of those. Certainly Oppenheimer certainly comes to mind in most recent times, of a film with epic scenes and epic nature. So did Napoleon hit the mark? Is it one of Ridley Scott's best in recent memory? Is it a fantastic film for what it is? Truthfully, and quite disappointingly, I have to say that is absolutely not the case. Now let me start with the things I did like first, because there's good and bad in every film, of course there is, but I have a lot to say on the con side of things. So let's start with the pros. And the pros are this. I said they're about epic battle scenes. They are the best part of this movie. The battle scenes in this, some of the choreography of the battle scenes, are jaw-dropping in certain moments. They are brilliant. They're brilliant. They certainly encapsulate the scale of it. And also, to kind of go in line with that, some of the cinematography and the scenery and just the setting of different scenes in certain parts throughout this movie is jaw-dropping. It's a film that should be seen in the cinema if you are going to see it. There is some beautiful, you've heard me say a few times, like desktop wallpapers that you would have, because they are just jaw-dropping in visual presentation throughout. There is so much to love here. The costume design as well, of course, deserves a mention. Obviously, recreating such an important historical piece of history, recapturing that with the outfits and the style of the time, and obviously making it recognisable that this is Napoleon. And starting with Napoleon himself, playing that role as Joaquin Phoenix. Now, Joaquin Phoenix, as I just mentioned there, is already one of the most prized assets in actors today. And that doesn't change from this movie. Now, yes, I do have things that I'm going to say that I didn't like the film overall, but I want to state this perfectly from the start. Joaquin Phoenix in this movie is fantastic. But that's like saying water is wet at this point. Joaquin Phoenix brings so much to this role. He brings so much. He's the only part of this movie. There's only two characters in this, of course, him and Vanessa Kirby, and their chemistry. It's the only chemistry between characters in the film. And what they have, and some cases is lack of chemistry, Joaquin Phoenix brings so much to this. And it's clear that this is one that he didn't take lightly in a role. This is clearly a passion project for him, I feel, in the same way that he would have been with Joker in that regard. And actually, while I don't know that he would get the award, I will be very surprised if he's not an Academy Award nominee for Best Actor in this. And on the flip side, well, that makes it sound derogatory. No, not the flip side. On the other side, we have Vanessa Kirby, who plays Josephine, his wife in this film, and of course in history too. And she also is fantastic. The two performances in this from them two are as good as they could be for what this is. But for what the script allows, I have absolutely no qualms with the performances. I think they're both fantastic, and I wouldn't be surprised if she was nominated in some way herself, because she is also fantastic. But getting that good stuff out of the way, the battle scenes, the performances, the visuals, there's a lot to love in that side. But let's get down to the stuff that I didn't like. And the stuff I didn't like, I could start breaking it down, and it could be, and I will go into further detail, but just on the outset, and this is as simple as I can put this, Napoleon is one of the worst paced movies I've seen in a long time. And to numb it back even further, Napoleon is a boring film. Now that's a really sad sentence for me to say, because I went into this hoping it could be one of my favourite films this year. And because of this, because of the pacing, because of the so much downtime, so much lull, and Ridley Scott has been making films for a long time, and I am not about to start critiquing him about how he makes his movies, but what I will say is there is clearly a misfire here in audience retention. Because yes, you have epic battle scenes that are kind of scattered throughout this film, but it's not like a brilliant movie with battle scenes where there's a battle and then there's brilliant dialogue to lead into the next battle. Something, ironically, like Gladiator. Gladiator, of course, Ridley Scott himself, who directed it, where you have the opening battle scene, which is fantastic, and it introduces us to Russell Crowe's character, it introduces us to the Emperor, introduces us to Joaquin Phoenix, and it completely encapsulates what we can expect. The epic side of Gladiator, but also the downtime. The brilliant dialogue between him and Richard Harris in those first opening, or kind of the following scenes from the opening scene. In that first act, perfectly paced that movie. And ironically, with the same director, it's like complete chalk and cheese. Because in Napoleon here, you have a brilliant opening scene. It's not really the opening scene, it leads into an opening battle. And the opening battle is really good, really exciting, really epic, for that word. But then there is a long part after that, and this happens every time. It's kind of just really exciting battle, and as soon as that happened, the movie screeches to a halt, to a stop. There is not where it kind of slowly builds the dialogue until we lead into an epic battle. And also, on that vein of thought, it's not a very coherent story either. Actually, it's really not. What it is like a highlight reel of Napoleon. That's what it is. It's like if you were just skipping through, okay, what was Napoleon's life like? Okay, well, he did this, and that's it. And a little bit of stuff with his wife. And the drama there. That's it. There isn't a coherent story. There isn't, and I say this a lot, and you're probably sick of hearing me say this if you've been watching my videos for a while. There is not much as an audience member to latch on to. And this is the cardinal sin that this movie commits by that point. When you get to the battle scenes, as you get to the second and third act, you might have seen the trailer, the one on the ice, for example, which is a brilliantly epic scene of battle and warfare, and also battle intelligence. It's really good. It's really good, don't get me wrong. But leading up to that is trying not to fall asleep. There is so little interesting dialogue to latch on to. And I'm not expecting Tarantino, by the way. But just, there's nobody in this film with charisma. And do not get that twisted that me having a knock at Joaquin Phoenix or Vanessa Kirby's performances, because it isn't. It's clear that they're working in the midst of what they've got, and they're actually trying to bring any kind of humanity to these roles. But it's all very stick in the mud dialogue, and I don't even know what that means, but hopefully you get what I mean by it, because I think this is such a wasted potential of a film overall. And that is my overall thoughts on Napoleon, because I could keep going about different things, but that's really the hindrance. And again, if you've been here for a while, you know, for me personally, story is such an important part of films. And that's not me being everybody says that, of course, that's the best thing about a movie, you know. But there is movies where you can kind of go along if the story is not the focal point, but it is decent. It doesn't have to be the best story you ever heard. You don't have to be so emotionally attached you're in tears. But you have to have something to grab onto, or you're just watching stuff happen. And that's not what movies are to me, and probably the same as you guys. If we're just going to see a history book brought to life, that's what this feels like. But it also just feels like, you know, if you're bringing a history book to life, you're not. If you're bringing it to life, give it some life. Not just, this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened. And you've got Joaquin Phoenix trying his best to bring any kind of life to any of this. Overall, Napoleon's such a swing and a miss for me. And it's actually one of Ridley Scott's biggest misses for me, because it's probably the one of his in the last while that I went in with the most anticipation. Because one of his most recent, I think even it might have been his most recent, which was The Last Duel, which I actually didn't get seen in theatres, but I watched on streaming about 6 months after it was released. Because there wasn't much buzz around it, there wasn't much chat, and I had heard people saying they were quite disappointed. It had Adam Driver, it had Matt Damon, it had Jodie Comer. I'm a big fan of all three of them. And I went into that and thought, I quite like, a bit like what I'm saying now. I like Ridley Scott, but people said they weren't too fussed on this movie. I really, really enjoyed The Last Duel. And again, that's Ridley Scott, that's a timepiece, that's historic, you know, set years and years, long before Napoleon is. And to have that be so... Ironically, a lot of that is character work. And it's essentially, not to say too much about the story, but it's a same story being told from three different perspectives. Two guys' perspective and the lady's perspective. And that's it. That's all I'll say about The Last Duel. But I really enjoyed what they did with that. And I really enjoyed what Ridley Scott did with that. So to come into Napoleon, which is a bigger movie, it is. You've got a very recognisable historic name. You've got one of the best actors working today, and you've got one of the best up-and-coming actresses on the planet. So you have... That should blend into something wonderful. But instead, it's a really incoherent mess. And overall, a boring cinema experience. Like, that really disappoints me to say. So let's get to rating time. As you can see, IMDb has kind of emulated what I'm saying. They seem to be a similar kind of vein. Although I'm going a bit lower than that. Because I don't think this movie is the worst movie there's ever been. Don't get me wrong. It's fine, but it's just so boring. Apart from the battle scenes. And the battle scenes alone are the reason I'm going to give this probably more of a complimentary score than it sounds like I would. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. However, I do think if I was forced to watch this again, and I hate that that's where we're at, but if I was forced to watch Napoleon again, I think I would like it even less. On first viewing, because it was new, because it was the epic battle scenes, the good performances from the two leads, 6 out of 10. Maybe generous. I think it is generous, actually. But I'm going to be kind and give it 6 out of 10. I would imagine if you listen to other people talking about this movie, there'll be a lot less complimentary than I am. And that's saying something, because I've been pretty harsh to that film. And I've maybe been more harsh to Napoleon than I have been for other movies that I've rated worse. The reason is, and as you can probably tell, I went in with such optimism for this. I really hoped that Napoleon... When I looked at this, and to tie it back to when I started this video, I said about at the start of this year, what movies do I think could be my top 5? What movies do I think are potentially going to be my movie of the year? There was 2 frontrunners. Well, okay, I'll say 3. The first one was Oppenheimer. Shock. The second one was Killers of the Flower Moon. If you've seen the TikTok review, you know my feelings on that movie. Lastly, was Napoleon. They were the 3. The other 2, if you've been around, you've heard my thoughts on them. If you haven't, I'll let myself do the talking on those films. But Napoleon is the one that it is. It's my most disappointing movie of this year. And I'm really sad to be saying that. So yeah, that's been my review of Napoleon. Not as cheery as usual, guys, I'll be honest, because... yeah, I did. I wanted this to be so good. I wanted this to be one of the best movies of the year, one of the best movies of recent memory, and a real top-tier, Gladiator-like movie for Ridley Scott. But instead we got an incoherent, boring mess with some exciting battle scenes scattered throughout, but not enough to save this dull experience. And it's such a shame. I've said that a few times, and I will continue to say it. This is the one that brings me the most shame this year. Because I wanted it to be so good. And it isn't. In my opinion. Obviously, of course, as I always say, for the good, for the bad, for the fantastic, for the awful, go and make your own opinion. Go and see the movie, you call it for yourself, but that's my thoughts on this. And yeah, if you enjoyed this review, leave a like, let me know you enjoyed. If you want to subscribe and stick around, I'd appreciate you so much for it. And if you do, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.